where the lift comes from. As the wind approaches the ridge, it is forced to flow up and over it. The resulting compression of air generates a lift band. This narrow corridor of air will support a paraglider if the wind is strong enough and coming from the right direction. A long, steep, unbroken ridge will create smoother, stronger lift than a smaller, flatter, ragged ridge. When you are flying across gaps or deep gullies, you should try to fly forward, away from the ridge. The airflow compresses and accelerates as it passes through the gap. This can drag your glider behind the ridge line, making it very difficult to get forward again. The direction of the wind in relation to the ridge also greatly affects the amount of lift. The best lift is produced when the wind is exactly perpendicular to the ridge. The more the wind is angled to the ridge, the less lift it will produce. Turbulence. One of the phenomena associated with any wing is wake turbulence. Wake turbulence is dirty air streaming backwards from the wingtips of your canopy. It's a common problem to almost anything that flies, from jets to seagulls. You can't really feel it affecting your own glider, but if you fly too close, downwind from another glider at the same height, you can feel a large shudder go through your own wing. In some cases, it can even trigger a collapse. If you're flying through wake turbulence, you will usually lose a bit of height, only a few feet, but it's something to be aware of if you're already scratching or a top landing at the time. Rotor is another form of turbulence. As the air flows up over the ridge, it starts to form waves of disturbed air behind the ridge line. This is not usually of any concern unless you are top landing well behind the ridge edge, or you have already been blown over the back. Trees, buildings, etc. at the bottom of the ridge can also generate some pretty ugly rotor. Remember not to top land downwind of these obstacles. If you're flying in crosswind, be aware that not only will the amount of lift be significantly less, so will your upwind speed. Your downwind speed will be much faster, and you could encounter areas of poor lift and even rotor, resulting in a bad crash. If you are flying quite low, especially on a downwind leg, it's a good idea to drop your legs out of the harness and get ready for any quick unplanned contact on your glider. Be ready to be lifted off your feet. If this happens, the main thing to remember is to keep the glider straight into the wind. Do not allow the glider to turn downwind. If it does, your airspeed will be added to the wind speed and you'll have a high speed downwind crash. If you can get your feet into your speed bar, use that, but carefully. Fly forward away from the ridge and then use big ears to land on the beach. Back to launching. Start walking backwards towards the ridge until you feel the glider trying to lift your feet off the ground. At this stage, you should be using your brakes only to keep your glider over your head. Another hint is to continually move your body so that you stay directly under the center of the canopy, instead of trying to drag the glider around with the brakes. As the lift from the glider gets stronger, try to move along the ridge, keeping your canopy relatively parallel to the beach. You can use quite a bit of brake, as the canopy will usually try to push you forwards away from the ridge. As the glider lifts you off the ground, let the brakes up so you have safe airspeed. Be careful of stalling the glider as you launch. Turn the glider closer to the ridge. This will keep your glider in the lift band. If you fly away from the ridge now, you will fall out of the lift band and be forced to land. Fear. over control. The most common problem new low-flight pilots have is over control. Heavy, late steering inputs that set up a pendulum motion in the glider. Trying to correct it usually makes it worse until you've fallen out of the lift. Keep your steering input smooth and to a minimum, and try and keep the glider as flat as possible until you have to turn. When you do turn, use plenty of weight shift. Try to turn the glider quickly but as flat as possible without causing a flat spin. The idea is to get the glider back into the lift band as soon as possible. It is often tempting to try to complete a full 360-degree turn on the ridge. This is extremely dangerous. The downwind part of the turn is deceptively fast, and you usually won't have room to avoid hitting the ridge at high speed.